Do you guys know the answer? Do you know? What's better, a quilt or a sleeping bag? Alright, so we're going to look at the differences between a quilt and a mummy sleeping bag. I'm using a mummy because in the backpacking realm, mummies are kind of the go-to when it comes to sleeping bags. The sleeping bag I'm using is an Outdoor Vitals Summit 20. The quilt that I'm using is my UGQ Bandit 20 degree. I'm not doing a direct comparison of the Bandit to the Outdoor Vitals Summit. I'm not doing that comparison. I'm just showing the differences between a sleeping bag and a quilt. So let's get into it. Take a look at the sleeping bag first. I'm sure most people either have one or have seen one. The hood at the top, zipper down the side. Pretty standard features like you're gonna see on most sleeping bags. So going to the quilt, obviously you have no hood. And the back is completely open, which means no zipper. The biggest advantage to going quilts is obviously the weight savings. Basically, the theory is when you lay on a sleeping bag, all of that insulation at your back is getting compressed. In my case, I use down sleeping bags. I'm not a fan of synthetic. They're heavier. They don't pack down as nice. I will carry down and I'll take the extra precautions to make sure it stays dry, because to me it's worth it. So going to the quilt, you don't have that material underneath your back. You're relying on, in my case, in my hammock, I've got my under quilt on a ground pad, like on a ground, you're gonna have your pad. Quilts are definitely very viable for ground dwelling. We'll take a look at that for sure. Okay, so at first look, first thing you're gonna notice difference-wise between the two. I mean, aside from the fact that I've got a different foot box design on my quilt, I'm not really going to get into that, but biggest difference you're going to notice on the sleeping bag, you've got a hood. On the quilt, you do not. For me, that works because I don't like the hood on a sleeping bag. I find it makes me feel super claustrophobic. So I usually will just kind of like lay my head on top of the hood, and then I wear a beanie or a toque anyways. So going to the quilt worked for me in that regard. And then the biggest difference you're going to notice between the two is when you flip them over. Obviously on the sleeping bag you've got material, and this is all filled with down. The theory is when you lay down on a sleeping bag and you squish all the down in a down sleeping bag, it loses its R value. So going to the quilt, Buzz, what are you doing? I'm just going to let him play because he's old and he doesn't get up and do much these days. So if he wants to play with that, I'll let him do it. Anyways, going to the quilt, the back is completely open. So you're relying on the heat transfer back to you from either your sleeping pad or whatever else you're using to insulate you from underneath. I know some people use Reflectix and a hammock. You got your under quilt, or you can use a pad as well. So with that in mind, going to the quilt made sense to me. Obviously, I mean, I'm in a hammock, but I was making the switch to a quilt regardless of going to the hammock because of the weight savings. I tried out this summer using my sleeping bag sort of as a quilt and seeing if it actually made a difference. And I noticed it really didn't. I wasn't any cooler on my back from going with nothing underneath my back to having sort of the material and the compressed down and everything. It felt different, I guess, just because I guess in your head you've got that comfort of the material underneath your back, and when you get to just feeling the, you know, sort of plasticky feeling material of your sleeping pad underneath you, it was kind of weird, but I got over it really quick. But yeah, those are really the main differences between the two. So using a quilt in a hammock is about the easiest thing in the world. You literally just climb in, slide your feet into the foot box. You can do up the snaps, pull this over top of your head, or just lay it over you however you want. It's wicked. You have so much freedom. It's so easy to vent if you start getting warm. You just pop your hand out, whatever. I'm assuming on ground it's going to be the same. On the quilt, on either side, you've got these loops here. And what these are for, so you've got them on both sides. Now what these loops are for, with my Bandit quilt, and I'm assuming most other quilt manufacturers have something very similar, or you could probably easily make it yourself, but what it is this loop of shock cord with 2 toggles on either side, and then a little tiny cord lock here, so you can kind of make it smaller or bigger. So what they do with this guy is you will slide this around your sleeping pad with just the piece of shock cord at the top, and then you will just adjust the 2 toggles along the line to wherever you want it, and you hook the toggles into the loops. So what we got here, we've got the quilt hooked onto the pad, so that just loops around the back. So I guess in theory when you toss and turn, the pad will stay attached onto the quilt. So I'm guessing when you want to get in, oh yeah. But you don't get to look this awesome in a quilt. I'm not going to show the hammock side of it because I think it's kind of a no-brainer. When you sit it on the ground, it kind of works the same in a hammock. With the sleeping bag, my preferred way is kind of using it like it is now. Zipper partially undone, slide your feet in like a foot box of a quilt, lay it over top of yourself. Good to go. If it starts getting cold, just kind of reach over, tuck it in. Works really well for me. Quilt, same kind of thing. Kick your feet in, pull it over your head, you're good to go. If you start getting hot, loosen it off, open it up, slide a leg out, same with sleeping bag, whatever. Which one is going to work for you? I don't know. That you got to decide for yourself. Hopefully this helps out though. If you got any questions, ask me.